Previously, the group immediately wandered into another fight, and the word vanquished appeared on the wall. Again. This one involved skeletons possessed by plants that didn't technically count as undead, much to Talk's disappointment. Still, the group defeated them fairly quickly and without any issues. A whirlpool was discovered in a dead end room with a clearly magical book nearby. The word catharsis was on the wall. Several attempts were made to give something up, both metaphysical and physical, but it quickly became clear that either Taria or Sean would have to do so. Sean ended up sacrificing a necklace that her mother had given her shortly before her death, one that she cherished, but was also seen in a bittersweet light because of the timing. Sean then wrote Mama's last necklace in the clearly magical book, and they passed the check in that room. The group backtracked and headed in the other direction, and they found themselves at another split in the path. There was a room to the north that had a fairly strong current coming from it. They decided to keep going eastward to see what was down that path before continuing north, since they suspected that was the final room as it looked somewhat different from the others. In the next room, the word synchronize appeared on the wall. There was a crack in the floor of the room beside the red pearl, and every 5 seconds a green acidic gas rose from it. The group thought there might be another pearl that they needed to synchronize with it, so they kept moving onward. They did find another pearl, but it had its own word on the wall: reclamation. There was a broken arch and column made of stone beside it, and they quickly realized they needed to attempt to fix the column, which they did almost shockingly quickly. Then they headed back to the synchronized room to try and figure out what to do there. There was a lot of back and forth before they eventually figured out there were switches at the bottom of the acid-spewing crack that had to be switched on together. Keelan saw that an alligator that Keelan summoned swam down into the crack to try and flip the 3 metal switches at the same time, but they failed miserably. The alligator was instantly killed, and both Keelan and a very injured Sava quickly swam back up. Sean healed Sava, and then Keelan and Sava tried again, this time with Zaya. That attempt also failed miserably. They hurriedly tried one last time, with Zaya using Misty Step to get away the moment she flipped her switch without waiting to see how the others did. It worked that time, and Sean was able to touch the pearl, which turned white. There was something like a shudder throughout the entire place as soon as that last pearl turned white. The group took a short rest, as several of them weren't doing great. Then they headed back to the room with the current, except the current was gone when they returned. Keelan and Sean noticed runes on the doorway to the room, and Taria realized it looked something like Dispel magic. As they crossed into the room, the water-breathing spell on all of them was dispelled, much to the concern of everyone who wasn't Keelan. Talk quickly recast it once everyone was inside. They found themselves in a room filled with statues, just like the last time they made it to the reward stage of a catch. There was also a sigil in the back of the room that was clearly on the verge of breaking. A heated argument broke out about what to do with the sigil. Oz, Taria, and Zaya were all for breaking it and taking its power. Keelan, Sean, and especially Tornak wanted to seal it. Talk abstained. Tornak talked some more about the horrors he'd seen on the other side, and he made it clear there was no reason in his mind to risk facing one of those when sealing it away would still give them power, just not as much. Taria was more terrified of the Praetors than she was the Shadow Spawn. After a fair bit of back and forth, Tornak said that he'd be willing to fight if that's what the others insisted on doing, but he wouldn't like it. Sean agreed, but told the group that everyone should remember that the risk of gambling was that eventually you'd lose, and she pointedly ran her finger over the scar going through her blind eye as she said it. Keelan agreed as well, but he wouldn't be happy about it if he had to fight. The fact that the 3 of them clearly didn't approve and were only agreeing to fight because it looked as if the others weren't backing down was enough to make Taria reluctantly give in. If they didn't really agree with it, then she didn't think it would be a good idea to fight Shadowspawn together. Sean point-blank asked Zaya if she was going to do the same thing she did with the previous ritual, and she called her out on attempting to sabotage it last time. Zaya did the fantasy equivalent of pleading the fifth. Oz and Zaya didn't interfere with the ritual, but they pointedly stayed on the other side of the room and didn't help either as the others moved to the sigil to set things up. Tornak led the ritual, with the others gathering at the other points of the circle. Keelan, Talk, and Taria all called on the more animal and nature aspects around them to strengthen it, while Sean treated the lines of the sigil like the veins in a body. The sealing worked surprisingly well. As soon as they finished it, it became clear that they'd succeeded and had won the reward they were hoping for. Various words appeared around the statues surrounding the room, and the group had to choose which 3 prizes they wanted, as 3 glowing lights made it clear that's how many they could choose. There was a lot of arguing involved, so much arguing, but the group finally agreed to choose knowledge because they needed any information they could get, travel because they needed a way to get places, and time because they desperately needed more of it. Taria very reluctantly walked over to choose travel, clearly upset that the others didn't agree with her choices. When she touched it, 2 compartments opened and it gave 2 options. The first was a small model ship under the word enduring, while the second was a stone spell tablet with the word instantaneous above it. When Taria clearly didn't care to make a decision, Oz picked the ship. Seeing that Taria was clearly reluctant to pick anything else, Sean walked over to the statue of the word knowledge over it. She was given a book written in ancient runic, which Sean couldn't read. Until suddenly, like magic, she could. The name of the book was Light and Shadow, and Sean quickly made a note to get through reading it as fast as she could. Then she walked over to the statue labeled Time, and when she touched it, she was given a small metal stopwatch attached to a chain with 1 button on top. She wasn't certain what it was or what it did, so she put it away for the time being. As soon as Sean finished picking the group's rewards, they were shunted upwards through the ceiling as if it wasn't even there. They found themselves back on the surface of the water, right beside the small dinghy that they'd left there with Tordek's dead body in it. They all climbed back inside the boat. And that is where we left off.